Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I'm bringing you guys keyboard content today. This is a mechanical keyboard channel now. And this is my keyboard. This is my daily driver at home. This is a Cooler Master Master Keys Pro S. And I actually reviewed this keyboard way back in the early days of the channel. And this is that same keyboard. I've been using it as my daily ever since. I actually really like this keyboard. However, it's getting pretty old and tired, and what I wanted to do was give it a refresh. Basically, I've kind of wanted a new keyboard for home for a while now, and when I bought my Royal Kludge RK100, this was potentially going to be my new daily driver at home, but I ended up keeping this one in the shop for just various reasons. And you know, I kind of thought I was very close to either buying another RK100 or getting like a Keychron or something, just because I wanted something just less rattly and newer and just felt like a change. But also, I really like this keyboard. It's got really cool RGB on it, which you guys can't really see because studio lighting. But I've got it on a cool blue 50% backlight with this raindrop effect on it. I'll throw in some stock footage of it actually in a more dimly lit room so you can see it, and I think it looks really cool. So what's wrong with this keyboard? Well, it's got Cherry MX Browns in, which are doing okay, but they've had a lot of keystrokes on them now, and they just sound a little bit tinny, a little bit rattly. The space bar is kind of, you know, it's got rattles to it, and just, I don't know, I just kind of want to refresh this. And I guess everyone talks about lubing your switches and your stabilizers and damping and stuff, and I thought, what would happen if I just tried to throw everything in the kitchen sink at this old keyboard, and like, could I make it feel as nice as a brand new keyboard? Can you make a grotty old keyboard feel like $1,000 if you throw enough time and effort at it? And I don't think this is actually worth doing. Well, we'll find out. But I wanted to find out if you can do it. And either we're going to get to the other end and I'm not going to notice much difference. I'm going to be like, well, okay, not really worth doing, but hey, that was kind of fun. Or it's going to be really nice, and it's going to be a case of, you know what, if you've got an old keyboard that you really like, you could actually make it feel brand new again. So, let's get to work. So first of all, I'm going to completely strip the keyboard down. I'm going to pull off all of the keycaps so I can clean the grot, because I knew it was going to be grossy, but man, seeing it under studio lighting, I can see all of the hair in there, and I'm just like, oh, it's going to be gross. So apologies in advance for anything that you guys see in this video. Here goes nothing. I'm going to go through. I've got a key puller here, so this is key puller at one end and switch puller at the other. We're only taking the keycaps off because this is going to have soldered switches. So here we go, everyone. Let's do it. Okay. Right, my crimes are laid bare, everyone. Gross. Don't tell me that your keyboard is sparklingly clean unless you clean it all the time, I guess. However, we're all humans, and humans are gross. Right, we're basically taking off the surround at the moment. There we go. So it looks like to make more progress, we're going to take out a couple more screws. We've got one here and one on the other side. And that might allow me to then lift the deck out. What do we say? We say aye. Oh. Come on. Oh, there we go. Oh, more grot. It's horrid. Oh, it's really savage. Oh, like I said, even if I end up not going through with this project because it's not worthwhile or like not viable, I'll feel better just having taken all of this grot out of the keyboard. Man, I have got a world of work ahead of me for this. So, I knew that the switches were going to be soldered in, but the way that this has been constructed is we've got a metal deck here, the white layer, and the switches clip into that deck. And then after they've all been put in, the PCB has then been laid over the top and then soldered in place by wave soldering or some other manufacturing method. So as a result, it means that I actually have to desolder every single switch before I can actually remove the top deck. That might not be as bad as it looks, because I have a desoldering gun, and I didn't have a desoldering gun the last time I was working on a keyboard like this. I've removed soldered switches before, but I've only had to do it for a single one, and I was able to just bully that one out. So this isn't the end of the world. I think the desoldering gun is really going to come to the rescue here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take out a single switch so we can have a look and just see what it looks like underneath. And I'm going to pick this key here. So let's desolder that boy. I'm going to turn on my desoldering gun, and we're just going to do a quick test run just to see how well that works. Alright, the desoldering gun is up to temperature. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just wet the joint with a little bit of fresh leaded solder, which will just make everything flow a little bit easier. So I'll just touch the edge of the gun there and just get that joint moving. Like that. Then we should be able to just put it over the top. Just get that joint nice and warm and then suck. And same thing here. Right, that pin is free. This one is just soldered back down. I'll just give that a nudge with a prying tool. There we go. There wasn't a huge amount of solder holding that on. So now I should be able to go at that with a switch puller. So we're going to put the switch puller, and we need to get these little notches there. We've got to push those in. It's pretty easy. You don't have to have a specialist tool for this. It just makes it easier. And then that just pulls out like that. Easy peasy. And that's how we're going to replace a whole keyboard full of switches. I'm feeling a bit better about this now, because I'm fairly confident that if nothing else, we can just replace all of the switches. And I kind of want to do more than that with this, but I think just putting in new switches will just give me that new keyboard feel that I'm looking for. Parts have arrived. I'm still waiting for one more thing that's coming from eBay China, but I've got enough parts to actually start working on the keyboard again. So let's start out with the switch choice. I've bought more Cherry MX Browns, and the reason for that is these are kind of boring, and this was a compromise that I had to make, because while I wanted to put some really cool switches in this that would feel great, but I realized that if I did that, I would not know if the change in feel of the keyboard is just the switch or the lubing, filming, foaming, stabilizing, and all the rest of it that I'd done with the keyboard. So I figured that I'd put exactly the same switches in, but I would do all of the maintenance work to them. So any change in feel after I'm done will be down to the maintenance work I've done, not just because I put in different switches. That was one of the compromises that I made in order to achieve my objective of, is it worth doing this to an old keyboard, or should you just get a new keyboard? Or should you just replace switches and do nothing else? So hopefully I should answer the question, at least for me, as to whether doing all of the lubing and stuff is actually worthwhile, or do you just buy nice switches? So I'm going to open up a couple of these and try and lube them. I'm not going to do all of them because we'll be here all day. Once I've done a couple here, I'm going to take the lubing stuff all home, and I will just do it in the evenings, and we'll come back with what should be a bag of pre-lubed switches. So to open them up, I've got this switch opener here. You can buy these online, but I actually found the design for this on Thingiverse and 3D printed it. So I 3D printed this on my resin printer. I've got a Uniformation GK2 resin printer, which made printing a couple of these very easy. And it looks like a factory part. You can print these on an FDM 3D printer as well. However, they will be more fragile. So I would expect the designer reckons they're good for about 20 opens without breaking on FDM. The resin one is probably going to be significantly stronger. I did 2 just in case, though. Here's a new switch. I'm making this up as I go. Let's bring the camera down and see how we get on. So my entire experience of applying key switch lube is skimming through a video I found on YouTube. So if I'm doing this wrong, you can all yell at me in the comments. Or failing that, you can provide tips in the comments for other people who are thinking of doing this. So to open this up, I'm just going to put this on here. And you can see that those little wedges are going to poke into the wedges on the switch and just press those open. So here goes. Not too hard, just so we don't break them. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we've opened that up, and we've got the top housing, the stem, the spring, and the bottom housing. So for my lubing, I'm going to get a bit of lube on the paintbrush, and I need to basically just coat all of the inside surfaces. I'm going to try and avoid the actual switch contacts because this won't damage the switch, but because this is a tactile switch, we want to try not to put lube on the tactile bump because that will diminish the tactility, the tactile feel of the switch. So just put that in there, and I'm just going to wipe that up the inside. This didn't feel like it went very far. I'm kind of worried that I'm going to use too much of this, but whatever, I guess. I guess some is better than nothing. So I'm just wiping that around the inside of the bottom housing there. I'll do one of these and then I'll compare it to another one from the bag and see if I can feel the difference. The video I watched, the chap did have an audio comparison between a lubed and unlubed switch when he finished, and I couldn't hear the difference personally. But maybe I'll be able to hear the difference when I hear it in real life. I think this is going to be a very subtle difference in the feel of the switch. Go. So I've just put some around there. Now the stem. Oh, picked up quite a lot on the brush there. Go around the outside. So the actual inside stem, you can lube that, but apparently that doesn't really do anything because that's not actually part of the action, if that makes sense. Right, and this side, I'm just going to go across the top there, but these little prongs here, these prongs here and here, that again is part of the tactile bump. So I'm going to avoid those. So I'm going to leave those alone. Put that there. And the spring, we're going to put a bit on here as well. And again, having some lube on the spring should just reduce noise from the spring, which is the objective. No idea if I'm putting on too much here. There's probably people screaming at me, but... Right, let's grab one of these films as well. I haven't looked up anything about these, so I have no idea how this works. I'll just get this one out the middle here. I can't figure out if the film has a backing on it or not. I'm going to guess that you're not supposed to remove the backing. In any case, by the time it's in there, it ain't going to fall out. So I'm going to roll the dice on that. So that goes in there. There we go. So that's got a cutout so it doesn't block the RGB as well. Stem. And housing. All right. Okay. Right, that should be done. So the other chap was right. It does make it is an audible difference. I can hear it is muffled. There's less clatter, which is and the slight sound that you get from the switches is all going to soundboard through the keyboard itself. So I think that's going to make a difference. As for the feel of it, I think maybe I might have gone overboard on the lube there. I think I might have put too much on. That's going to be a practice thing. So that's the procedure. So I'm going to sit and do that on 100 of them. That's going to be my evening for over the weekend. Right, here's my bag of lubed and filmed switches. I think I over-lubed them myself. Adding lube will reduce the tactile feel of a switch because by definition you're making it smoother. And browns are not exactly a heavy-duty switch when you start out with. So these kind of feel a lot more linear, but then when I actually go and touch a linear keyboard across the room, I'm like, oh, that's definitely linear, you know. So maybe once they're actually in the keyboard, they will feel better. But at any rate, I decided to just YOLO and just, it is what it is. If nothing else, they should be smooth and quiet, and that's kind of what I was aiming for, if I'm honest. If I wanted really good feedback, I should have used a different switch in the first place. So, you know, again, compromises, we've got to decide what's our objectives with this project here. The films, I'm not really sure if those make a difference, if I'm honest. I put them in because they were cheap, and because I'm taking the switch apart anyway, it was zero additional effort to add the films when lubing. Lubing is a lot more hassle than putting films in is. I feel like it makes the housing a little bit tighter, so there's less, you know, it tightens up the tolerances in the switch. So maybe that will make a difference once it's all in, and there's just a bit less movement in the switch, which in turn equates to just less creaking and noises from the whole deck when you're bashing away at it, you know. So we'll see how that goes. They certainly sound very pleasant, so, you know, we'll see how it goes. So that's the switches. I've also got the stabilizers here. I haven't lubed these yet. These kind of need to be done as they go into the keyboard. So we'll do those when I actually get to the assembly. Then going between the plate and the PCB, I've got this modular foam. So these are little foam squares that go around each individual key to provide just more damping. So those will get to go in as well. And then finally, I've got this sheet of closed cell foam. This is A4 size, and that I'm going to cut to shape and put underneath the deck. So that again should provide just more sound damping for the keyboard. And the end result of that is hopefully that should just dampen the, because this keyboard just sounds very hollow. It sounds, you know, it's a fairly heavy keyboard because it's got a metal plate in it, but it sounds hollow. So I'm hoping that this is just going to reduce that echo, if you see what I mean. So let's see how we go. Right, I put the keyboard back together again because I had to record the before sounds. So now I've got to take it all apart. So I'm going to strip this down, and then I'm going to get the desoldering gun on, and we're going to take out all of the switches. So let's roll the big desoldering montage. There we go, everyone. That is all of the old switches out. Man, I can tell you one thing. I would not do this without a desoldering gun. If you're an absolute wizard with a mechanical solder sucker, sure, maybe. But even with a desoldering gun, this was a mission. But thankfully, that did make a breeze. A couple of ones here and there I had to touch up and then redo. There was also a weird extra pin holding the plate on. That pin was fairly heavy because it's just soldered to a, well, it's tacked onto a metal plate. So I went in there with the soldering iron and some wick to help out there. But apart from that, that was really straightforward. So now we have one PCB and one plate. The stabilizers need to come out as well. I think I can just give those a nudge from the back. I don't know. Let me just try attacking that with a prying tool. Yeah, that's working. These stabilizers are pretty simple, but these ones have just got so much play in them that I think that's why the stabilized keys rattle so much. The new ones that I've got are Duorock, and I mean, like, they don't seem particularly fascinating, but they seem to have tighter tolerances than these, and I'm going to put a crap ton of lube on them as well, which should also just help suppress any rattle on the spacebar and stuff like that. One metal plate. All right. I'm going to take this into the kitchen and just wash it in the sink because it's filthy. The PCB, man, if I'd thought ahead, I'd have put this in the ultrasonic when I did the keycaps. But I'm not firing up the ultrasonic to do this. It just doesn't seem necessary. But what I can do is I'll get a cloth and I'll just get a damp cloth with some glass cleaner on it and just wipe that down, and that'll just get all of the schmutz off of that and make it look nice and clean. This is not going to be visible, so it doesn't really matter if it's not pristine, but we can easily just make it look a lot nicer. It's kind of interesting to note that it does actually have all of the footprints for the US or ANSI layout, as well as ISO layout. However, this plate is specifically ISO or UK layout. So I would need to change the plate if I wanted to actually convert this to a US layout keyboard, which I might want to do so I'd have a better selection of keycaps and things like that. Because the main issue with running a Euro layout keyboard is you're extremely limited in keycap options because no one supplies like the big enter key and stuff like that. Right, I'm going to go and clean this stuff up. There we go. Right, my PCB is nice and shiny and clean now. Looking a lot smarter than it was before. The back is a bit grubby, but, you know, that's going to be a lot harder to clean because you can't just wipe that down. I'd have to go over it with a toothbrush and stuff like that, and there's not enough dirt and grime to be worth cleaning there, and there's no points for cleaning that, so not super fast. The top is nice, though. My plate I have wiped down on both sides with warm water. So that's looking nice and shiny again instead of having stains all over it. And this is the bit that does matter because you can see the plate between the keys of the keyboard. So you want this to look nice. I'd love to spray paint this a funky color and have a really cool background color between the keys. But also having it white is good because that's just going to help bounce around the backlight color. So if I wasn't backlighting this keyboard, I'd spray paint this like a really nice powder blue or something like that. But obviously, I want the backlight to be doing all of the legwork for illumination and color. So that's that. What I think I'm going to try and do, which I think is a bit optimistic, but I'm going to try and put all of my new switches into the plate, then just flip the whole thing over and just place the PCB down on top of it. Now that's gambling that all of these holes are going to line up perfectly. And I may regret this, but I'm going to try it anyway. So here goes nothing. Right, now I need to figure out how to stabilize her. So I'm going to empty these onto the bench. Thankfully, I've got the existing stabilizers, which seem to be basically the same. So I've got more or less a guide here of what they're supposed to look like in the keyboard. So having put one of the stabilizers together, honestly, it doesn't feel meaningfully different to the ones that came out. These weren't mega expensive. I think I paid like a total of like £7 for a set or something, or £6 for a set or something like that. So it's not a major loss there, but I'm a little bit disappointed. Like, maybe that's just the way stabilizers are, but I was expecting something more exotic than this. Stabilizers are in. So, right now, I'm going to flip this plate over and I'm going to fit my modular foam to everything. So, if you had a mainstream keyboard, or if you had like a foam and a laser cutter or something like that, you could just get a sheet of foam and custom cut it to just go straight over the top of this. But with this modular foam, the idea is that I can just peel off these one at a time, I guess. It's not coming off. One moment, please. No, seriously, I can't peel this.
What are you trying to do?
Try and get any of them off. Oh, with extreme caution, I've managed to peel the second one off, but yeah. I think these are supposed to be peel off, but someone has used the wrong adhesive or the wrong backing or something. Something's gone terribly wrong. Okay, I think I can work with that. It's just going to take ages. Anyway, so now we take one of those and we put it around a key thusly. And because they're narrow, I should be able to just cram all of those in. That's the theory. I'm starting to get some of these off cleanly now. It's just a trial of tears to get them off. But that one's come off properly, and I've actually got a decent sticky back on it.
Is it worth it?
That's what I'm trying to find out. There's only one way to find out. Right, that's the first sheet of the modular foams used up, and it's going to plan. It looks quite nice, so you can see how they all fit together now. When I did the first couple, it was a bit unclear, but now you can see them all clustered together on the middle of the keyboard. That's making a lot more sense. There. Now, I don't know if these things are going to make a difference or not, but they look freaking awesome. That looks really slick, and I'm going to immediately cover it up. However, it's very pleasing seeing them all there, and that's really what matters here, right? Good. So, thankfully, it looks like I've managed to do this without bending any of the pins on the switches. So theoretically now, I should be able to take my PCB, flip it over, and just lay it on top. Here we go. Just going to look and make sure that none of the pins are getting bent. You'll need a bit of push and shove. And I'm going to have just a pair of tweezers on hand, just so I can just direct some of the pins that are not quite lining up. You know, I think that modular foam is going to do me a lot of work. I think that's going to help a lot. Just because, you know, yeah. It's hard to tell how much, like, confirmation bias there is in all of this, because I'm putting in so much labor into this keyboard that I'm convincing myself that it's going to make a difference. So, dunno. You guys will have to be the judge. In any case, it's time to solder these switches in. So now it gets a little bit scary because I've got to commit to that, otherwise spend another however long I spent desoldering these keys. And of course, there might be, I have no idea if there are any bad switches in here, but if any single switches don't work, it's very easy to remove a single switch from the keyboard. It's just removing the PCB again afterwards that's going to be a problem. So theoretically, we should be completely clear now. Let's heat up the soldering iron, everyone. So I'm going to start by tacking in the 4 corners and just a couple of other random switches on the keyboard to make sure that the PCB is pressed down fully, because obviously we don't want any like bumpy bits in there. So I'm going to press down pretty hard on this one and then just solder that guy in. Man, I'm going to go through so much solder. Good. Right, we're on. So, now I've just got to buzz across all the rest of those holes. So, time for the fast forward soldering montage. Right, so that is all the soldering done. There's little brown spots of flux here and there where the flux from the solder is in, but the solderers among you would have seen that because there were big through-hole components, I was just feeding, you know, meter after meter of solder into this thing. So like it's heavier and significantly stiffer than when I started. And I don't know how I feel about that. It made some funky noises when I initially picked it up, but I guess it's settled. At any rate, I think we're good. So that is ready to go into the keyboard. Now the last bit of work I've got to do before the final assembly is on the bottom case, and we've got to put that into there. So let's figure out how we're going to do this. So I think my strategy is just going to be to poke holes in this. That works for the narrower posts, but not for this big wide boy here. I need a bigger screwdriver. Right, I kind of ended up just YOLOing that, as you just watched me do, and it seems to have worked out pretty good. I've made a cutout around where the cable plugs in, and I've kind of left this area open because, like, where the port is there, I could put a tiny square there, or I could just not bother because that's not going to matter. And like some of the main electronics for the PCB are kind of down in this area as well, and I want to give them some breathing space. So I'm just going to do a test fit and see how this goes. I don't know if I'm going to need a cutout about here for where the foot insert is. And then also there's a screw hole here, but there isn't one of those over there. So I'm just going to try and test fit this and see what happens. And, you know, if we go, we go, you know. I'm going to plug the cable in just in case we're actually go time. I hope this foam isn't just hideously too thick. I've got a horrible feeling that it's just too thick. I'll try putting the bottom clips in first. No, there's no world where that's going to happen. I think I'm going to just take a line out the bottom of that to give it some clearance at the bottom, because just where this comes down here, there's just no space for that to fit in. So again, I'm just going to YOLO it. Let's just try taking some out and see how it goes. That's had a big effect, I think. There we go. Oh, that's a big bulge in the middle there. That's a very big bulge. Ooh woo. Am I okay with that? No, I'm not okay with that. We gotta fix that. There we go. That's an awful lot less pretty than a nice simple sheet across the bottom or something pre-cut. However, foam is foam, and technically this doesn't matter. Just more foam, betterer, probably, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, so that should also provide additional damping under the keyboard. Most of it is under the actual QWERTY section. You know, there's less over on this side, but this is, you know, home group and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be good enough. Let's try third time's the charm. Dunzo. So keycaps, I wanted to get some cool funky keycaps for this keyboard just so there would be like a visual update to it. But it's really hard to find interesting keycap sets that are Euro compatible. I did have I trawled through a lot of eBay and AliExpress listings and could not find anything that was Euro compatible, so with big enter key, long right shift, short left shift, etc. And was also shine through, because otherwise, personally, in my opinion, there's no point in having a backlit keyboard if you don't have shine through keycaps. Because if the letters don't light up, then what's the point of the backlight? You know, you may as well just not have a backlight and have the selection of non-backlit keycaps. So finding shine through keycaps that are Euro compliant is really hard. I couldn't find any I liked, so I'm just going to stick with the pudding keycaps I've got. These are called pudding keycaps because they've got this clear outer, they've got the clear base layer with the black top layer. And these are really great on RGB keyboards because the basically the whole bottom half of the key lights up. This is also really good if you've got north-facing RGB like I have, which means the LEDs are on the top of the key. And obviously because I'm looking down at the keyboard, I'm seeing the bottom half of the keys. The top is behind the key stem. So on a lot of modern keyboards, you have what's called south-facing RGB, where they've rotated it so the LED is at the bottom, so you can see the light better when you're looking down at the keyboard. But that's the perks of an old keyboard. So anyway, let's start putting all of these keycaps on. I think that's the kind of sound that we actually want from a keyboard. Well, the kind of sound that I want from a keyboard anyway. Okay, so the sound is more or less exactly what I wanted. It's soft, it's muted, and it's low pitched, there's no rattles, and that's great. But the feel is terrible. It's mushy. There's too much lube in the switches, which is making them feel mushy. The springs don't return with a nice crisp snap, and the stabilized keys actually have a lot of return problems as completely. You know, like they just don't. I was having issues with them springing back at all in some instances, so there's no other way of saying it other than the switches are ruined. Now, when I say ruined, I don't mean that it's a case of throw them out. It's a case of to use them again, I need to take them to bits and wash them and just wash the lube out, basically, which is what I shall do. And so that begs the question, well, where are we going now? Well, I took all the switches back out again. I sat on the keyboard for about a week with it with the switches in, just to see if they would bed in or anything like that, and they didn't. And again, sound was awesome, feel was terrible, and I was at the point where I was like, okay, I have to just admit that these switches are not working out. So what am I going to do? I can either just give up and put the keyboard on a display stand on the shelf and buy another one, or I can buy new switches again. So I bought new switches again. So I bought a set of Durock T1s, which are the switches that I would have bought if I was going to change the switches in the first place. And I stripped the keyboard and put those in. The Durock T1s come apparently slightly pre-lubed from the factory, and they are a tactile switch with a fairly heavy spring in them. So now I've put those in the keyboard. And I did this during one of the podcasts because you guys didn't need to see another montage. So let's do another sound comparison with where we're up to now with the Durock T1s. So the noise has come up a bit now. They're not as quiet and muted as the lubed MX Browns were. However, we have still eradicated most of that high-pitched clatter that the keyboard originally had. So, I think this is a reasonably good compromise. Keyboard's still a little bit rattly, although, again, not quite as bad as it was. Ultimately, I think the sound has improved, and I think that is a mixture of all of the things done. I don't think any single thing I did to this keyboard really made a huge difference on its own. I think it is just doing all of it at the same time. However, I do think that doing all of it at the same time has more or less got me up to the same state that my RK100 is in. So if we want to start drawing conclusions, my conclusion is just buy a modern keyboard. Because the amount of work that you will put into this will get you up to the level of just a stock modern keyboard that's not terrible kind of thing. So that's that really. Wasn't really worthwhile, but I sure as heck learnt a lot. In terms of the feel of the keyboard now, the T1s are great. They are pretty heavy. Like I would say these are not for the faint of heart with the weight of them. But also I really like that. The amount of feedback you get is fantastic. You really feel the bump on these. Whereas MX Browns are very subtle. MX Browns are extremely accessible, but they're not going to change your world. Whereas these T1s, that these are tactile switches. It's a proper clunking switch. So I'm quite happy with that result. So with all of that said, that's the end of this keyboard adventure. I spent too much time and too much money on this thing. But like I said, I learned a lot, and the keyboard does feel good to use now. I don't plan on replacing this keyboard in the near future at this point. However, I won't be replacing the switches again. I hope you guys found that kind of interesting. Thank you for watching, everyone. See you next time. Bye.